Hi, I'm Tom Fitton, President of Judicial Watch, with our weekly update here on Facebook Live. An historic week here in Washington, D.C., the first week of the new Trump presidency. We're super excited by some of his moves, and he got off to a good start with his inauguration speech, talking about cleaning house here in Washington, D.C., and exposing the corruption of both political parties. That's music to the ears of Judicial Watch, which those of you who don't know, we're a non-profit anti-corruption watchdog. So to hear a president come on and talk about corruption the way he did in such a forthright way was just music to our ears. And then to follow up with specific executive orders on issues of the rule of law that we care about, that was just tremendous. And let me just say, even as one of his executive orders is cutting or limiting the ability of the federal government to hire new government employees. As conservatives, we understand that big government means big corruption, and the bigger government gets, the bigger the corruption is. So even that is an anti-corruption move. But also the key rule of law moves were related to immigration this week, where he undid much of Obama's lawlessness on immigration. Obviously, he's moving forward quickly with building the wall, which will contribute to the security at the border, which I've reported to you is a dire threat to the United States, both in terms of human trafficking, drug trafficking, and the cartel jihadist alliance that Judicial Watch has been instrumental in uncovering and exposing to the American people. So a wall is the least that can be done, and it's good to see him moving quickly on that. But he's also focusing on interior enforcement, and his executive orders are the executive orders we need from presidents, which isn't to tell your administration to avoid the rule of law and to figure out ways around the law, but to actually enforce the rule of law, as President Trump has said. And to see the president come up this week on that DHS and highlight the fact that it's a law enforcement agency and talk about the victims of illegal alien crime as opposed to the rights of or the problems that illegal aliens who are victimizing Americans have here in the United States. That's just a remarkable turnaround. And Judicial Watch has been trying to enforce the rule of law alone for many years. We've been suing sanctuary cities alone for many years, like our current lawsuit against San Francisco. We've been trying to expose what's been going on the border alone, exposing what DHS has been doing in terms of releasing illegal alien criminals onto the streets alone. And it's good to see that the administration may actually be joining us on this, and to have an arm of government that may be interested in enforcing the rule of law rather than actively undermining it. So that's just great work. And there's more work to be done. And we're going to support the administration when it promotes the rule of law, and we'll defend the rule of law in court if necessary, even if it means defending the government's actions. But we're also going to call out the administration when it fails to follow the rule of law. And in this instance, Trump has yet to pull back the Dreamer policy that President Obama lawlessly implemented, which provides amnesty to supposedly young illegal aliens only. And it's completely contrary to law. He couldn't get it passed through Congress, so he just provided amnesty almost outright on his own. And Trump could take that away with just a stroke of a pen, and he hasn't done it yet. And in fact, his administration has been issuing these lawless work authorizations to illegal aliens without any basis in law, even through this week. Now, supposedly, he may repeal this today through another executive order, but we'll see. So we're hoping he does the right thing. But in the meantime, there's still some lawlessness going on he needs to take care of. Great news on the State Department front, especially those of us who want some more accountability on the Clinton email issue and on Benghazi. And the top echelon of the State Department was let go, including by Trump, including the Undersecretary of State for Management, Patrick Kennedy, who was involved in the Benghazi scandal, which saw the needless deaths of 4 Americans and the subsequent lies about how that happened. Remember, they blamed it on the video in a demonstration as opposed to an al-Qaeda attack. Kennedy was right in the middle of that. And then, obviously, he was a key enabler as the top administrative official of the State Department. We deposed him under oath, by the way, on the Clinton email matter. And so the media would have had you believe initially that these folks were resigning en masse because they hated Donald Trump. No, the Trump people came in and let him go. So if they're resigning, that's fine. I don't mind a self-draining swamp. But going in and removing agency bureaucrats who've been responsible in part for the corruption of the prior 8 to 12 years, to be frank, is something that is as important a thing for Mr. Trump to be doing, as I said before, as changing policy. And Mr. Trump and voter fraud, back in the news again. Trump is more right than the big media that wants to keep its head in the sand on voter fraud. Most Americans already ask for voter ID. We have millions of aliens here in the United States, both legal and otherwise. And the idea that there are only a few dozen voter fraud cases, or none at all, is just ludicrous. Are there 3 to 5 million? I don't know. But an Old Dominion study, Old Dominion University here across the river in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the authors of that study examined prior elections and found significant numbers of illegal and legal aliens illegally voting in elections in a way that could have swayed a Senate election in Minnesota, Al Franken, and helped North Carolina go to to Barack Obama in 2008. And I looked at those numbers and I said, now what if we applied these numbers to the 2016 election? And based on my guesstimate, it'd be like about 1.1 million voters would have voted for Hillary Clinton illegally. Now, Trump would have gotten a few votes illegally too under that analysis, but only 20% of the total. Not enough to make much of a difference. So that's incredible. And the study's authors, he thought it was 800,000 potentially of illegal aliens and aliens voting illegally for Hillary Clinton. So obviously there's evidence and a study that shows that there's likely voter fraud. And Donald Trump's call for an investigation of voter fraud by the federal government is long overdue because practically speaking, it's never happened before. It's never really happened before. And it's a simple process. All you need to do is, let's put it this way. Initially, all you need to do is for the federal government to get the voter registration lists and the voting lists, which are publicly available. So this is data that you and I could buy, and certainly the government can get access to, and take that data and compare it to databases the federal government keeps on, for instance, illegal aliens here in the United States, and even aliens here in the United States. And also they have data on people who died. There's a death registry database. Compare it to those two databases and you'll get a good indication whether there are people who are dead or here illegally or foreign nationals here who shouldn't be voting generally, whether they're legal or not. You'll be able to figure that out pretty quickly. And the next step obviously is to start enforcing the rule of law against those voting illegally. But what's the harm in doing an investigation? And my view is the left is desperately afraid of serious voter fraud investigations because it means the jig is up for them if that goes forward. Because the left, as I've said repeatedly and observed repeatedly, wants to ensure that they're able to steal elections if necessary. Now, it doesn't mean that Republicans never engage in voter fraud. It doesn't mean that someone doesn't ever vote illegally for a Republican or a conservative. But the left has policies in place, and under the Obama administration was actively advocating for policies that placed our election integrity at risk. For instance, they didn't even want to look at non-aliens or aliens voting potentially in Florida. Why would you be against that unless you wanted them to be able to vote? And obviously their attack on voter ID is just at odds with all common sense. So Donald Trump is right to take on this issue, and they want to argue whether it was 3 million or 5 million. I think it was 1 million illegal votes, but we don't know unless you look, and let's start looking. So big news there. Now there's more work to be done by Donald Trump. I mean, we were in court this week, and we were trying to get records out of one of the computer files or hard drives that the FBI picked up of Hillary Clinton. And long story short, there are just 35 records that they found in the larger database of information the FBI had to look at. And the FBI went into a federal court this week and said that Judicial Watch should have to wait up to 2 years for those records. Just 35 records. Now, that's the Trump now FBI, to be clear. So, there's got to be, I'm hoping the staff and the agency heads get put in place so they stop this sort of obstruction. And I hope it doesn't portend of things to come. I told you last week as well about a court order ordering Jay Johnson, the Department of Homeland Security, to preserve emails on a private email account he had because it looks like there may be government emails on those accounts. And that order was issued before the Obama administration ended. I think it was either Wednesday or Thursday of last week. Well, guess what? We just found out this week they didn't comply with the order. Jay Johnson didn't comply with the order. Supposedly the DHS, all the King's horses and all the King's men in the IT department of the DHS and Jay Johnson couldn't figure out how to copy that email from his Gmail account to a hard drive or a flash drive. So they didn't do it. And now they're asking the judge today to reconsider his motion or his preservation order. Shows that they had contempt for the rule of law, and it shows you, I can't imagine the Trump people signed on to this, that there are some people at the Department of Justice or the Department of Homeland Security that are taking advantage of the confusion and the gap in a transition to allow this lawlessness to go on. But we're going to call them on it, and I just hope no one in the Trump world approved this because, as I said, it doesn't augur things. It doesn't bode well for what's going to happen in the future. Other big news this week, we filed recently, I may have told you about this already, but just want to bring you up to date. We've done two things related to Hillary Clinton's violations of our national security laws. We haven't forgotten about that, by the way. We filed a lawsuit over the decision by the Director of National Intelligence, which is kind of the grand poobah of national intelligence here in the United States, not to conduct a required damage assessment of what Hillary Clinton did. We know classified information was on the system, and when classified information is exposed like that, they're supposed to do a damage assessment. And certainly if you're going to prosecute anyone, you would think a basic step would be to figure out what damage was done to the security of the United States. You can imagine the Obama gang and Mr. Clapper didn't want to do that, and that's why they didn't, even though the law required it. So we asked for documents about that. They've yet to give us the documents, so we just sued recently on it. But we also sent a letter to Mr. Clapper directly from Judicial Watch telling him he needs to follow the law on this, otherwise he can expect a lawsuit from Judicial Watch. So let's hope that something is done either by Clapper or his successor, who I think is going to be the former senator from Indiana, Dan Coates. I don't know when he's going to be confirmed. But either way, they got to get on this. And it shows you that we're in the middle of the Clinton email scandal, not at the end. And the Trump administration is going to have to deal with it, whether they prefer to deal with other things politically or not. But this is a key rule of law issue. And I tell you, whether it be Benghazi, the IRS, or Hillary Clinton, if the Trump people and the Trump administration understands the American people want accountability on this, then I think he'll really satisfy a lot of Americans who think Washington is broken when it comes to the rule of law. A lot going on also. I'm sure there's going to be big news even today on Friday. We have the March for Life, which is occurring as we speak. This week, before I go, you have to buy the book. The paperback's out. Clean House, our great book. It's a great book to tell you what went on the last 2 years of the Obama administration with Benghazi and the IRS, and being told to hold it higher so you can see. The paperback's out. It's a great book, and it's not only, it was written before we knew who was going to win the election. So we wrote it assuming that an administration could be either Democrat or Republican, but either way, certain things needed to be done to clean house here in Washington, D.C. So it's a great book. I encourage you to buy it. It's on paperback. Obviously, you make a public policy statement when you buy books like this on Amazon, because the more people who buy it, the higher up on the list it gets, and the more attention it gets from obviously other book buyers and the American people, but the media who tracks this. So I encourage you to take a little bit of time and do a little bit of activism, and you'll get a good book in the end for doing it as well. Next week, I want you to be alert for the Supreme Court nomination, which presumably will be announced by Mr. President Trump. He said he's going to announce it next week. My guess is it will probably be by Thursday. I encourage you to let your senators know what you think about President Trump's nominee to the Supreme Court. I've looked pretty carefully at the nominees that have been mentioned. They all look pretty satisfactory. And the one thing that strikes me is that President Trump isn't going to put another politician on the Supreme Court. A court and courts generally, which have too many politicians on the bench, those who want to write the laws they'd like it to be, as opposed to applying the Constitution, preserving the Constitution, and not legislating from the bench. So the Supreme Court fight is going to begin next week, and you can participate in it. And senators, believe me, senators want to hear from you about what you think. And whether you're represented by a Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter, because Democrats have a politically difficult choice to make whether to filibuster a nominee. And if you don't agree with that, you should let them know. The nominee will probably get through. The question is how smoothly, and whether or not we're going to allow him to be destroyed, or her, whoever the nominee is, prior to his being put on the court. So a lot going on. We'll be tracking what Trump is doing. When he does good, we're going to be singing his praises, as I did in part today. When things are not going well, we'll tell you as well. We'll call it as we see it. Remember, Judicial Watch is your independent watchdog here in Washington, D.C. We changed history with the Clinton email scandal. We're the #1 watchdog here in town. The media, Congress, and frankly the administration relies on us to be a lodestar as to what to do in terms of transparency and exposing government corruption. So you can count on us to continue to do that work as honorably and diligently as we can. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great weekend.